Inescapable. Chapter 2. The Guest. The city streets had never felt so alive. The street food, the dancing, the drunken stupor. It sucked him in like a black hole. He had a few drinks himself that night, but he wanted to remain sober for his very special companion. She glanced at him over her shoulder and gave him a wink that only she could muster. He didn't know why, but he was head over heels. He was so madly in love that it blinded him every time he thought of it. Men would kill for one glimpse of her beauty. Like many, he instantly fell for her. She called him her one and only. Those were happy days. He didn't think anything could ever go wrong. It was all so perfect. It was perfect. Until she broke her ties with him. Tom's body jerked. Reality struck back. He thought that if he slept, he would wake up in his apartment. But he could still feel the hard wooden floor beneath his legs. The chilling air of night brought goosebumps to his limbs. Everything was covered in darkness, save for a few spaces illuminated by the moon. Not that he had anything to fear. He found some comfort knowing that. He felt over the floor and found his gun still placed by his side. Looking back on it, he had forgotten why he came here. The only thing that drove him was pure instinct. He couldn't let the chance of escape slip him by. Or so he thought. He didn't know what really brought him here. Something happened. The police car. He suddenly remembered the crash. As if by some miracle, the fog had cleared up in the time he slept. Through the window, he saw the dirt road that expanded towards the horizon, but his hope for rescue was quickly dashed. There were no road markings, and the police car was gone. Where's the road? He slumped down from the window and allowed the light to bathe his figure. He didn't know what to do. Nothing seemed to work. There wasn't any point in trying again, and he was exhausted. He would wait until morning before trying anything again. He closed his eyes and did his best to shut everything out. He didn't want to look at it any longer. He wanted to remain in the dream. He would allow the nostalgia to envelop him like a warm blanket. He nearly got his wish before something stepped across the floor. His eyes opened. There was no way of ignoring it. The vibration could be felt across the floorboards. His hand carefully inched its way towards the pistol. His thumb pulled the hammer back. His mind told him he was being paranoid, but his body knew better. So he stayed wary, hoping to spot something he didn't notice before. He held his breath. Something had startled him awake, and whatever it was, it made sure to keep quiet the moment he woke. "Is someone there?" he whispered. He was greeted by silence. "I have a gun! Come out where I can see you or I'll shoot!" He was bluffing, of course. Whatever was hiding could have leapt out at any given moment. He was more than aware of how powerless he actually was. "I'll say it again! Is someone there?" And then an idea hit him. "Tap once for yes and twice for no." It took a moment before he heard a very faint tap across the floor. Tom blinked as if trying to push back the overall shock. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" It tapped once. It responded quicker this time. "Have you been watching me?" There was a pause that put him on edge before hearing two small taps. "Is there a way to unlock the doors?" It tapped once. "Can you tell me how?" It tapped twice. "Why not?" The thing in the darkness stopped responding. "All right then. Is there a way out of here?" Not a sound came back. "Is there a way out of here? Answer me!" It occurred to him that the thing could have lied about everything. Either that or he was hearing things that weren't there. But another sound made itself known. Something small dropped to the floor and rolled against his shoe. The light revealed an ordinary spindle of red thread. What was stuck inside the spindle, though, was what perked him most. His fingers pulled out a tiny slip of paper from the center hole, and it read, "Open the closet." Tom stuck the note inside his pocket. He stood up and took one last look towards the sound source. Somewhere, deep down, he wanted to know if there was something there. The fear, however, kept him from investigating. Something in him knew the moment he crept into that darkness and reached out for it, there would be nothing there. I must be losing it. He forced himself to look away and breathed a heavy sigh. He held the gun in both hands and carefully crept his way to the closet door. Every step brought with it a creak that echoed all the way into the walls. He left his little spot of safety and edged closer and closer into the shadows. The pounding sensation of his heart and his shallow breaths were the only signs that he was truly awake. The slower he advanced, the more his eyes became accustomed to the dark. The sky outside had painted the home's interior a darker shade. What was once a black hue progressively became an odd mixture of dark blue and gray. As time passed, he could even see more from the dry, chipped walls to the holes and splinters along the rugged surface. The frame of the doorway came into vision, as well as a knob that he couldn't open. He kept his lips shut and placed his fingers over the cold metal jut. But he stopped for a moment. Something in him didn't want to know what lied beyond the door. His hand began to turn, and surprisingly, the knob followed. Every sound sent a shiver down his arm. He started sweating, but his hand continued the motion even without his conscious consent. And then he heard a click. His eyes widened. The door produced a crack for him to see inside, but he couldn't make anything out. He slowly opened it and stared into the blackness. Even with his well-adjusted eyes, he couldn't see any distinct shapes. No coat hangers, no shoe boxes, nothing. He stuck his hand inside and pulled back instantly when he felt something soft. "What the hell?" he stammered. In a split second, something knocked into him, and he fell to the floor in a panic. A chair banged harshly against the wooden floorboards and a body along with it. He could see something squirming like a worm. He nearly dropped the gun the moment he fell. He pushed himself back to gain some distance. Whatever was inside the closet had hit the floor hard, yet the very idea of it was strange. He hadn't heard a sound when he first entered this home. When he opened the door, something came alive. It's as if the door canceled all noises like a sound barrier. Or perhaps he had awakened something that was there without his notice. "Stand up! Let me get a good look at you!" He shouted at the thing still moving on the floor. "I can't stand up, you idiot!" a soft voice replied. He crawled towards the individual writhing about. Upon closer inspection, he could make out the outlining of this person's figure. It was feminine, petite, and yet fully grown. Hang on. His hands got to work. He found whatever knots were holding her in place and quickly severed them. It didn't take long to cut her loose. He took a few steps back and into the moonlight, allowing this figure to get her bearings. She stretched her limbs out like a cat and rubbed at her sore wrist before standing. "Who are you?" Tom said as he raised his weapon. "Yeah, nice to meet you too, Sunshine. Why don't you put that gun down before you hurt yourself?" the woman replied. "Not gonna happen." The woman tilted her head towards the gun's side and gave him a look. "You know you left the safety on." Tom turned his gaze and felt a mixture of shame and humiliation when he found his safety lock engaged. He was so on edge that he forgot to check. He pushed the lock down with his thumb and brought the weapon back at his target. "Feel better?" she said with a smug smile. "Don't look so stern, Mr. Sirius. I'm not gonna bite. Well, not in any way that will show, at least. My name's Sarah Lee, by the way." "Tom Fisher," he said with the gun still aimed in her direction. "Well, I think it'd be in both our best interests if you put the gun down, Tom. You wouldn't want to waste those bullets on someone like me," she said as she stepped into the light. He could finally see her, but had trouble believing the features the darkness concealed. Her black hair fell down to her shoulders, and her brown irises gave off a reflective glint. Her face was soft, and her body sleek and noticeably curvaceous. She gave off the aura of an Asian beauty, and yet something felt sharp-witted and cunning. Tom put the gun down but kept his eyes on her. "What were you doing in the closet? Why didn't you say anything?" Tom asked with a hint of suspicion. "What, are you kidding me? I was screaming in that closet for hours. How could you not have heard me?" Sarah shouted back at him. "I didn't hear anything until you busted out of there and crashed into me." "That's impossible." She looked down with a look of shock across her face. "Well, anyways, sorry I pointed a gun at you," Tom sighed. "It looks like we're stuck in here." "What do you mean?" "The doors, I can't seem to get them open," Tom said as he motioned towards the front entrance with his cuffed hands. Her eyes caught sight of his handcuffs, and her face soon shifted. "Are you a convict or something?" Sarah said while taking a step back. I was being shipped to a nearby prison in this state, but, well, things got complicated." "Complicated how?" "Look, it doesn't matter. The moment we get out of here, we'll never have to see each other again. Do you know a way out?" Tom said with impatience in his voice. "Did you try the doors?" "I already did. None of them budged." Sarah's legs shook a little as she walked across the floor, but she eventually made her way to one of the doors. "That's because you're doing it the wrong way," she said with a clever smile. Tom watched as her hand pushed hard into the knob, making it sink into the door. It wasn't until she heard a click that she started to turn the knob, surprisingly, in a counterclockwise direction. The gears behind the door came to life. As if awakening some ancient creature, the mechanism groaned with dull moans. Tom pulled back in astonishment when the door easily creaked open. These doors have a very special sequence. Honestly, you didn't try pushing and turning in the other direction? "I didn't know they made doors like this," Tom said, examining the door as it swung on its hinges. "That's because they don't, Mr. Sirius. You might have realized by now that this isn't some ordinary house you've stumbled upon." He felt somewhat foolish for not trying to push down the handles. Then again, the thought never occurred to him. Such strange contraptions shouldn't exist in such an old home. The house seemed to have its own rules. He couldn't think of why someone would install such protective measures, especially ones that prevented people from getting out. It didn't make any sense no matter how much he tried to rationalize it. This wasn't designed to be a prison or an insane asylum, so what was it? "How do you know all this? Just what the hell is going on here?" Tom shouted. "Calm down, I've been here a little longer than you have, although I can't remember much of what happened to me before I was stuck in that closet. Everything before that was a blur. I'm guessing the same thing happened to you?" "Not exactly," Tom said, eyeing the front entrance. "Is there a way to get out?" "There is, but it's complicated," she said with a hint of disappointment. "Can't we just open it like you did this door?" "No, that doesn't work. You see, there's a tiny little lock placed on the opposing wall," she said as she pointed to the wall right across the front entrance. "Who the hell designed this place?" Tom said, shaking his head. "Beats me," The key itself is located in the basement, but I've never been able to get in," Sarah said as she stared into the darkness of the next room. "You need 2 people. There's a pathway of steel cages that you have to crawl through, and the key is at the very end of it. But you need someone else to lift the cage doors, or you won't even be able to enter." "Shit." Tom clenched his fist. "Hey, relax, Mr. Serious. Now that we found each other, we've just doubled our chances of getting out of this mess." She began to grow comfortable with the nickname she had given him. Yeah, you're right. Is there anything to eat or drink?" "Yes, there is. I remember hiding a stash somewhere in the kitchen. I'll make my way there now," Sarah said as she stepped into the new room. "Hey, wait!" Tom grabbed her wrist before she could step through the doorframe. "What?" "Is it safe?" Tom said with actual concern. She continued to give him that look as if contemplating what to say. "Yes, it's safe, Tom. I haven't run into anyone besides you," she said, trying to reassure him. "You're sure about that?" "Positive," she said with a charming wink. He let go and she stepped through to the other side, but she quickly spun around to meet his gaze. "But just in case we do run into someone we don't recognize, I thought of something that could help us recognize each other. Since we can't clearly hear each other's voices when the doors are closed, let's invent a code of sorts, so we can allow each other into the rooms." She tapped her knuckles against the door 2 times, paused, then tapped once more. "Put your ear to the door, and if you hear that signal, you'll know it's me. You'll do the opposite. Tap once, pause, then tap 2 times," she said, explaining the process. "Got it. Tap once, and then tap 2 times quickly, right?" "You got it. All right then, if I'm not back in 30 minutes, don't be afraid to look for me, okay?" Sarah gave him a playful smirk. It was clear she treated the proposal with half-serious intent. "Wait, one more thing." Tom's voice made her stop as she turned around once again. "Earlier, someone dropped a spindle with a note inside. Was that you?" "No, I was in the closet, Tom. I wasn't even aware you were here before you opened the door." "Right," Tom said, shifting his gaze to the floor. "Don't worry, I'll be back in a jiffy," she said, casually patting him on the shoulder. Sarah left for good this time, but the moment before she closed the door, her eye peeked out from the narrow slit. "Don't you go getting any funny ideas now, okay?" She shut the door. The sounds of her steps into the next room faded, and he was left alone once again. A feeling of peace hit him soon after their discussion. It made him feel somewhat at ease despite the dreary atmosphere. But a disturbing thought crossed his mind. He had left her without any sort of protection. He was the one with the gun. "It'll only be 30 minutes. 30 minutes. He turned back to the door. "We should be able to make it back on time."